Hello, hello. Hey, everybody.
Hey everybody, man. As soon as we start, Leah, all of the questions start populating. And I get a sense people are starting documents and they're like, I'm going to get in there with a question ASAP. I love that. Please
I
introduce
mean, I
yourself,
think
folks.
I think people know that there's a little bit of a first mover advantage to getting your question in very quickly. So we've got some
That's
people who
right.
are strategically jumping on, is my guess.
That
Hey,
makes sense.
folks. Hello, chat box. Hello, everybody. Oh my goodness. Okay, I see Tempe. I see Riverwoods,
Reno, Fort
Illinois.
Collins, Tallahassee, Santa Rosa, Piedmont, Watsonville,
Asia.
Bill in Boston, just calling out, was the first. Boston won this round. Austin, Buckeye, Phoenix, got Delaware, Barathon Barathon from Tucson. I like that. Maybe I'm mispronouncing. Sorry. Sudbury, Massachusetts, Ava, Missouri, in the Philly area. We are at that stage when everything is going really fast and it feels like we're a community and that we're everywhere. And it's because both of those things are true. Leah and I are in different places. She's out in a democracy conference, which is appropriate now, which means I get to spread out like this in her office. I'm loving it. On the downside, I did have to take the kids to school today, and it is the third day for our 2.5-year-old. And that means she's now at the stage where she understands that not only is she going to school, but we're not there with her at school. So she kind of koalas herself around you when you're trying to do drop off. Hopefully it improves. Leah, anybody else
Okay,
you've seen in the chat?
Honolulu, Twin Cities, Waldport, Oregon. It's going so fast. Arkansas, Colorado, Texas, Whittier, California, Leonardo, New Jersey, Pasadena, California, San Francisco, Tulsa, Newark, Long Beach, Chevy Chase, Georgetown, Texas. It just keeps going, y'all. Hello, everybody.
Just keep
Hello,
going.
hello.
I would love to do maybe we do a survey sometime on where are you to see. I would guess that we have every single state in the country plus a lot of other countries represented right now. But I know we got a lot of questions. I want to get into them. Lee and I are different places, so she can't tap me on the leg quietly and tell me to move on. So I'm going to just do that myself and move on, Leah. We good to go?
We are good to go.
Okay. We didn't introduce ourselves. Hey, everybody, I'm Ezra.
I'm Leah.
And we're the co-executive directors of Indivisible. Uh, and this is What's the Plan? You have found us at What's the Plan? This is where we come together as a movement to talk about what is the plan? How are we fighting back against the authoritarian breakthrough moment that we all find ourselves in? What are we doing together? We have a real bias at Indivisible, not just towards political consumption. We're not just trying to consume information. We don't just want to know things. We want to know what we do, which is why we named this What's the Plan? Because we always want a plan. We want something to do. Our democracy depends on our action, and that's why we are here to talk about what those actions are. And we always start these talking about the groups that make up the Indivisible movement. Lee and I are talking to you here. We're not the leaders of the Indivisible movement. I'm sorry, we're not. The leaders of the Indivisible movement are all across the country. They're in about 2,500 local Indivisible groups everywhere, small towns, big cities, rural areas, suburban areas. That's where the leadership comes from. That's where the power comes from. And it's an honor to be able to work with all y'all. And it's a pleasure to be able to introduce new indivisible groups to the movement because every week I say this and every week it remains true. There are a ton of new indivisible groups that have joined. In the last week, we're still averaging 4 or 5 every single day. And I'm going to just very, very quickly go through, but show some love in the chat to these brand new indivisible leaders from all over the country. I'm just going to highlight a smattering of them. First, I noted we had about 30 in the last week. 5 of those were in California. Full 5 were in California, which is great because California has a big redistricting fight coming up, and we want a lot of organizing headed into November. Indivisible will be supporting that, of course. Denise with Windsor 1 Million Rising, Indivisible group in Windsor, California. Maria, West Sacramento, Indivisible. We see this a lot. Like large enough cities will often have multiple Indivisible groups representing different parts of the city. Love to see it. Uh, Diana from Yes We Can Indivisible in Santa Rosa, California. We've got Vladimir from Indivisible Los Altos. And then we've got Teresa from Oakhurst Side with Justice in Oakhurst, California. As I'm reading these off, if you're like, hey, that town's near me, reach out, join up. If you are in an indivisible group and you're like, oh, they're in my state, also reach out, start talking with each other, share best practices, talk about how you're organizing and how you can work together. This is how we build. This is how we build together locally. Okay, so beyond California, Leah, I'll go fast. I know you're giving me eyes now.
Go,
I'll
go,
go
go.
fast. Okay.
Yeah.
Tracy, Indivisible, Delaware, Diamond Chapter, Newark, Delaware. Denise, Indivisible, Indiana River County, and Fellsmere, Florida. Another one in Florida. Leslie with Indivisible, Appalachian, Apalachicola, Florida. Gene, Forest Hills Indivisible with Forest Hills, New York. We got three in New York this week. Emily with Del Mar Indivisible in Del Mar, New York. Christine with Indivisible Richland Voices of Reason in Pulaski, New York. Charday, sorry if I'm mispronouncing your name. Steel City Indivisible in Pittsburgh. Love that name, Steel City Indivisible. Brenda with Indivisible Ogden in Utah. And rounding us out is David with Indivisible South Shore in Milwaukee, Wisconsin. Who are these people that started these groups? Where did they come from? What authority do they have to start their own organizing group? Their authority, their credibility comes from the fact that they live in this country and they're in favor of democracy. That's who is starting these groups. They are volunteers organizing their community. If you want to be part of a community that is organizing, find your local Indivisible group and get to organizing. If there isn't one in your small town or in your city, awesome. You get to start it. That's how this works, folks. This is how we build power. That's how we build power locally. Leah, what do we do here? Why are we here together every week?
Folks, we are on What's the Plan, where we talk about what we are collectively doing together. This is going to be mostly Q&A. It is mostly live with some questions submitted in advance by Indivisible leaders. We've got a very active chat talking about everything that is going on. But if you have a question that you want answered, put it in the Q&A function. We're going to be taking them from the top mostly with like a little bit of judgment to try to create some variety in what we answer. Upvote the questions that you most want to see. Let's see, this will be recorded. It will be sent out to everybody who registered, and it will be on YouTube, so you can watch it as many times as you want to. We are also gonna include in that email that we send out to you all of the links that we reference as we go through the call. So you will get the CTAs, you will get the resources, whatever we're talking about, we'll make sure that you get it so that if the chat box is moving too fast, it's gonna come to you again. Let's see, we are going to keep doing these as long as folks find them useful. They have been pretty well received. We are growing every time that we do a call. And then finally, just want to have a note on respect. So this is a space where we cover a lot of really hard stuff. This is incredibly personal for many people on the call. It is a scary and or hard time, and that can produce like a lot of really deeply held feelings. Respect and honor that. And also we want to be constructive and supportive to each other. This is a place where we are going to talk about strategy and how we can collectively make it through this. And we have to approach those questions with a lot of respect and care for each other.
Love it, Leah. I'm realizing I'm talking a lot here, and I'm sorry for that, y'all, because I also would rather hear from Leah. But she's at this conference, she's been busy, so I said I would do a little bit of an intro. Um, and let's see how this lands. I do think we have some fun stuff to talk about before we get to Q&A, but I will wrap this up in just a couple minutes. Leah and I were talking leading into this, and one phrase I think we both heard a couple of times in the last few weeks is this reference to authoritarian August. Have y'all heard that? Authoritarian August? I, I'll be honest, I get it. I really do. I mean, what have we seen in the last several weeks? We've seen the cheerleading of gerrymandering schemes in Texas. We've seen this like, terrifying ramp up of Trump's secret police and mass deportation force, and this I just think this disgusting offensive occupation of our capital city of Washington D.C. And so like this sense of like God, this authoritarianism really seems to be heating up. It feels overwhelming, and we talk a lot about this on this call that one takeaway that you could have from all of these actions is that Trump is inevitable, right? That he has this power to do all of this without concern for pushback, and that what are we all doing to find his rule? Like, why are we resisting? It's just all pointless. And I say what I'm about to say, not just as an organizer or a cheerleader from the opposition, but as somebody who follows the experts in authoritarianism, that feeling of inevitability, that is a big part of the point. It's a classic chapter out of the authoritarian playbook. The goal of this regime is the goal of any authoritarian regime. And it's to make you think it's so strong, so that it is so strong. Eh, That means for those of us who want a democracy that responds to the will of the people, Our job is the same. Don't give Trump's regime power it doesn't have. We expose the lie. We demonstrate that we are not afraid to stand up, to speak out, to organize against the regime. And I believe this is my honest belief. I think Trump is a lame duck, unpopular president who is fearful of losing power and acting out of desperation and fear. That doesn't mean he's harmless. We can all see that. But it does mean he's beatable. And the way we show this is with our actions. We're not just tuning into the right stuff. We're not just learning about what's happening in politics. We're acting. A huge bias towards action here. What does that action look like? Powerful, visible opposition that gives other people hope and invites them, welcomes them into the fight. When we say courage is contagious, which we say all the time, that's what we mean. So that's why here's the big action right now. This Saturday in DC, we are following the lead of Free DC and local organizers to oppose the opposition. We will be out there this Saturday. If you're in DC or in the surrounding area, please come out. Be part of that opposition force. We need you out there. And then beyond that, No King's Day 2 is October 18th. This is the first What's the Plan that we've been able to officially announce the date. We've been doing a big push with partners over the last 48 hours. This is still in the soft launch territory. We are going to fully launch next week, but we want to give organizers time to start spreading the word and start getting events together. We need your help to spread the word. The way I'm thinking about it is this. No King's Day 1 was one of the largest protests in American history on a single day. We had 4 to 5 million or 5 to 6 million people out, 2,169 communities, 27 countries. It was incredible. It was incredible. And if the first No King's Day was focused on Trump's ridiculous military birthday parade, that feels like eons ago. But that's what we were concerned about. He was going to look strong with this ridiculous authoritarian display of power. And we needed to show that we don't support kings. We don't support that kind of monarchical rule. That was No King's 1. This No King's Day is about Trump's occupation of free American cities and his secret police force that's terrorizing communities across the country. It's ramping up. He's already been doing a lot of damage, and he's rattling his saber at a lot more cities. And Leah, are you going to let me get a little nerdy and historical for a sec? Yeah. Okay.
You can do it. Yeah.
Okay. I'll just be a little bit nerdy. I'm reading a lot about the American Revolution. I find it increasingly fascinating and relevant in the moment that we're in right now. 250 years ago, the country was founded obviously in opposition to the king. This is what's driving a lot of the no king branding. And it wasn't just opposition to a king, but opposition to an overreaching mad king. And what was that mad king doing that was so bad? Why did the American population rise up against it? Well, he was enacting laws to subjugate Americans and concentrate power in the crown. And importantly, what else was he doing? He was occupying an American city, a great American city, Boston. He was occupying a city. And look, this could have just been a fight between Massachusetts and a king, but it wasn't. The colonies banded together. They united indivisible in defense of this bold new idea. No kings in America. That was the idea. And we're the inheritors of that legacy. The regime that we are currently occupied by is passing laws to self-enrich and concentrate their power. It's occupying American cities. And we are not waiting for the next election to stand up against authoritarian rule. We're showing up now. That's how we fight back. That's how we've been fighting back for a quarter of a millennia. So when I say we, I mean all of us. My top action item for us, we try to lead with action items. Our top action item this week is very simple. Spread the word. Leah and I, look, we're going to do our best. We'll do our best to talk to everybody we can, to recruit, to tell journalists, to try to get the word out. But this is going to spread because you spread it. That's how No Kings 1 became one of the largest protests in history. That's how we're going to beat that record on October 18th. So check out nokings.org. Tell people to mark their calendars. Reach out to friends and family members. People who didn't make it to the first one, awesome. They have an opportunity to be part of history. We need them there. We had Erica Chenoweth on here a few weeks ago, one of the intellectual leaders behind the 3.5% rule. 3.5% of the US population is about 11 or 12 million people. We reached about half of that in No Kings 1. We're going to keep on growing. We're going to build. We're going to have more than half of that headed into No Kings 2. But to do that, we need you. So please, if you do one thing this week, we hope you serve as a major advertisement for opposing kings in this country. Leah, do you have any other action items or other reflections on the American Revolution that you would like to share?
Let's go to the questions.
Okay, we'll go to the questions. Thanks, everybody. And if you want us to do, hey, here's what I will commit to. Leah, you're going to take the next monologue. You're up next week.
Okay. Okay. All right.
Okay. Uh, okay, going to the questions as a reminder, you can vote them, you can submit them, and we'll get through as many as we can. 15 minutes, not too bad. We've got at least 45, 50 minutes for questions. Okay, Avi Black asks, what can be done to prod the relatively more responsible media to acknowledge the widespread actions going on now under Indivisible and others' leadership, whether it's a million or 5 million people on the street or thousands of 1 million rising gatherings? It barely merits mention on the front page of the newspapers or in stories on PBS. Yet New York Times and PBS NewsHour, for example, give the bully pulpit to milquetoasts like David Brooks, who claims the mantle of being anti-Trump and the only one smart enough to realize people need to organize resistance while persisting in pointing out that nobody's doing anything of the like. God, I saw that. I saw that too. It pissed me off so much. Sorry, Leah, you go. I've been talking too much.
I think like one of the real tensions of this moment is that we are committed as a matter of strategy to building the big front or like the big tent and the united front and being like in alliance with people who we are not aligned with on many, many things. And also, occasionally you're like, hey, David Brooks, like, have you considered doing a little bit of research about what's been going on before you offer some thoughts on this? Because we'd be happy to talk about it, right? Nonetheless, David Brooks, you are invited to No Kings too. Here's what I would say on the bigger question here. Like, first, I would gently suggest that we actually did get really strong coverage of No Kings in June. Like, I don't have the full numbers in front of me, but we got you do. Ezra has the full numbers in front of
Well, I
him.
just know we got about $500 million in earned media just for
Right.
Indivisible and No Kings alone. So, I mean, it was pretty substantial.
Yeah, so I think one is I can definitely name the like three articles that did not do what I think was a good enough job of covering it and how annoyed I was about it and et cetera. And I'm sure you can too. And also we got a lot of really good national press and we got phenomenal local press. A lot of you, really did the work to
Yeah,
bring in
that's right.
your local media in frankly like cut papers and in like circulation ways that are and in local news ways that makes more difference in terms of reaching more people. So I would kind of gently say I do think there is a challenge with the overall co-optation and anticipatory obedience of the mainstream media right now. And I also think that actually No Kings broke through. And it broke through
Yeah,
because we were able to show up in numbers and in coverage that was unignorable. And so I do think that we shouldn't get ourselves down on the fact that that is possible to do. Now, the other thing that I will say is a lot of the people that we ultimately want to reach like we actually can get pretty good coverage in these mainstream press pieces, right? On New York Times, in PBS. A lot of the people that we need to reach, they are not reading the New York Times. They are not watching PBS. They also don't know who David Brooks is. And we actually have to reach them on a bunch of platforms and channels that might not be our own comfort zone. And so one of the things that we invested in with the first No Kings and that we're going to go deeper in this time is different influencer strategies, right? To try to get people on TikTok, on Instagram, people who are consuming most of their news via short form video or via influencers who, are not political at all. And that's going to be a really important part of the push to reach people because we just can't assume that if we get the front page story in the New York Times, that that's actually getting to the coalition that we need to build here.
that's right. Uh, I do want to call out some of the good folks in traditional media. I think Rachel Maddow has done an incredible job covering the protest from their inception and then how they've developed over time. Incredible work. I want to call out The Guardian. Can I just say, like, if you are subscribing to a legacy paper, I don't know what I would put above The Guardian right now. If you're subscribed to the Washington Post and you're like, well, I don't have enough money for two papers, cancel the Washington Post, subscribe to The Guardian. They're covering both great opinion pieces and great writing. They are a affirmatively, I would say, a pro-democracy news source in the legacy media space. And then in the new and emerging space, I'd call it The Contrarian, which is started by Jen Rubin, who left the Washington Post to start it up. And then there are just a lot of great new creators out there who are a source of information for people who actually care about what's going on. And I would invest more of your time, attention, and if necessary, money for subscriptions into those new media platforms. I think that's a good way to get the word out. Eric asks, oh, Orchard City Indivisible in San Jose. Hey, Eric, I lived there for a year. What is Indivisible's position on donor states like California protecting themselves financially while also hitting the Trump regime and its lackey red recipient states where it hurts in their treasuries by withholding all of the federal revenues and taxes that they collect and send to the feds in order to starve them of their fascist policies and programs of their monetary lifeblood? And instead to use that retained money to fund in full programs that will otherwise be decimated within their states due to the effects of the big ugly bill, HR 1. Leah, do you want to talk a little bit about donor states and our thoughts on the tactics?
The totally honest answer is, I'm checking with our own team as to whether we've got any particular reflections on this as a tactic. My overall frame that I would have here is, I think this is a pretty high order act of non-cooperation that we're talking about, right? Like this is when we talk within 1 Million Rising about kind of tactics to exert pressure. This is a pretty substantial kind of non-cooperation, right? It's like a lot of how federal power is experienced is actually the interaction of state and federal power and collaboration. And I think what Eric, you're suggesting is really kind of like a saying that the federal government is withdrawing these things from the state and is overexerting its power. And so here's a way that the state might push back. I think in order to get to the higher order pieces, elements of non-cooperation, and we talk about this when we talk about, folks who are looking at a general strike, when we talk about folks who are looking at all kinds of different forms of like really bigger picture disruption, we have got to build muscles, right? Because fundamentally, if we cannot get our folks out to a training session, we are not going to have the political capital and the organizing heft to move into higher order forms of non-cooperation. I know there are a bunch of people who have been part of really hyper local organizing to protect communities from ICE or to try to meet mutual aid needs where there are gaps that are created by the withdrawal of the federal government. I know there are a lot of folks who have been hosting 1 Million Rising trainings and thinking about what is actually, what do campaigns that target pillars within your own society, your own leverage and your own networks to get them to withdraw cooperation? What does that look like? We need to build to the kind of bigger picture campaigns that are possible. And we need to do that both by building our own muscle and also by building the political capital and the political will and the understanding of exactly how damaging, tyrannical, overreaching, and illegal this government is before you would look at those kinds of higher order actions.
Am I wrong, Leah, though, that when Trump was menacing Maine, the governor there threatened to withhold funds from the federal government if he continued? That
That
there was like
you may know more than me there. Or I
This
do
was like an
recall
early skirmish, and then ultimately
that.
Trump backed off. Here's what I'm looking for from Democratic governors, which is disproportionately that's where the donor states are. So California, big, huge donor state, Illinois, big donor state, et cetera. I'm looking for them to go on offense in creative entrepreneurial ways. And I'm somewhat agnostic as to the specific tactic, but I do think we should be holding our blue state governors and blue state legislatures to a high bar here. I think too
Right.
many of them are kind of cowering in the corner and hoping that nobody notices that they lead a state. And there are others like JB Pritzker, top of my list, but Gavin Newsom, who I'm not like naturally the biggest fan of, is going on offense in big ways. And I love it. And we should be giving a lot of love to JB Pritzker and celebrating what Gavin Newsom is doing. Because remember, these folks aren't just statesmen and stateswomen, they are politicians. Politicians like praise and they don't like criticism. So give love to those who are fighting back and compare and contrast. If you happen to belong to a blue state that is kind of backbenching right now, ask them why the hell they're not acting more like JB Pritzker. Why aren't they acting more like Gavin Newsom? If you're in DC right now, I sure as hell would be comparing Muriel Bowser to JB Pritzker and Gavin Newsom. Like that is the benefit of having 50 different states. Some are going to be leading, some aren't. And if you happen to be one of the backbenchers, you can compare and contrast. We've got a question from Nina Leah. I know this is something you've been talking about and thinking about a lot. Indivisible team leader in Colorado. We need an indivisible national to start to put together a quote unquote emergency contingency plan that all the groups can implement if when we reach the point where it's crucial for people to take to the streets nationwide and not leave in absolute defiance of and not leave in absolute defiance of the Trump machine. And we need a plan for what we would do and how we would do it. Um, uh, I think that's the nut of the question. Scared of a boiling frog problem that will miss the opportunity to resist collectively. So the sense that is there some point that the action is just beyond the pale where we either show up or it's game over, and how are we preparing for that moment so people are prepared to act quickly? Leah and I have had many conversations about this offline. Leah, do you want to share some of the thinking and the current planning?
Sure. I would say this is like very much related to the last question, right? I think there's a bunch of questions around kind of as things escalate and if there is a moment that is kind of a spark for a broader pushback that is necessary, um, how does that work and what are the tactics? And you're identifying one, which is sustained mobilization, right? Like it's like we're going to mobilize and it's not a one-day protest, it's like we're staying here. That is one of the things that folks looked at as a tactic in a moment like this. But the other place and the reason why we've emphasized non-cooperation so much within 1 Million Rising is that when you look at actually what meaningfully disrupts power in an authoritarian regime, you're actually really looking at people refusing to do what they are expected to do that keeps the regime in power and running and functioning accordingly, right? So the kinds of things that actually make them back off are stuff like business freaking out because everybody stopped buying at things and stopped showing up to their work. Or, people are like, they are targeting an industry in a way that's actually like really disruptive to their expectations and their finances. Or, a lot of different faith leaders are coming out collectively and saying like, this is a bridge too far and this is categorically unacceptable. Or, you have a different or you have like kind of withdrawal of cooperation from state governments, from universities, from some of the different entities that we've seen them trying to chill and co-opt. So I think my push here would be I hear you on the need around kind of like what's sustained mobilization look like, but I actually think in a moment like that where we're talking about kind of red lines crossed and a need for like a wholesale societal pushback, we need to be thinking part of the reason why we have emphasized this stuff through 1 Million Rising is because we also really need to be thinking about these like societal withdrawals of consent.
Love it, Leah. We've got Deb from South County Resistance. When we hit the numbers we want in the streets, how does that transition to political power? What are the next steps? One thing, just to correct, we talk about the 3.5% number. That's not like a magical law or a rule that you hit 3.5% and suddenly you've got a democracy. It is a rule of thumb more than anything else. I believe when they examined countries with an authoritarian breakthrough moment and they came up with 3.5% as the figure that needed to be mobilized, it wasn't that democracy automatically was saved. It was that you had a vastly higher percent chance of saving democracy if you hit that number. The way that mobilizing in the streets and mobilizing in defense of pillars of democracy and putting pressure on pillars of democracy that are falling works is it causes the regime to back off and it functions to save free and fair elections headed into the midterms. Our fear right now is that if we do not mobilize in this moment, that it's not just going to be media and law firms and universities and businesses that are falling to Trump's pressure. We're also going to have National Guard and ICE agents and military forces in American cities all around the country come fall of 2026. And who knows what that will result in come the midterms. So it's not that we mobilize in the streets and boom, we get political power. This is a defensive action by us to safeguard the democracy so that we can reclaim power next year through the normal democratic process. And the only other thing, we've said this a lot, this is our second rodeo, I would say, with this. It's a slightly different rodeo, but it is a second rodeo in the sense that in 2017, when Indivisible first got started and we were mobilizing massive protests against the repeal of the Affordable Care Act, a common question we got was, yeah, but you're showing up in the streets, but will you actually show up in elections? And what we found was the exact same people who were organizing protests against the repeal of the Affordable Care Act or against the Trump tax scam back in 2017, those were the people who were knocking doors, calling and texting voters and getting out the vote to produce the largest midterm margins in the history of the Republic in 2018. I think the House of Representatives is on the table. I think the Senate is on the table. I think Virginia is on the table this year. We can retake power, but to do that, we can't say 15 months from now, you've got to show up. We've got to show up now to start building up the force that can create that political power for us. Leah, other thoughts?
Yeah, I saw a follow-up question in the chat that was like, okay, that's super helpful, but like, are we going to have an emergency plan? And I think,
Oh,
first of all, very reasonable. That and the short answer is, I don't want to promise like there's a specific plan that we're going to put in writing and like brief everyone on all of these fronts. In part because I think that like this is pretty late order stuff, and we like have to do some internal planning and coordination with a much broader set of people across the ecosystem in order to have something. And that's not it's just not something that like we can do by ourselves. And also I can promise you that like we take very seriously the need for folks to be prepared in a moment like that. And we will like you will be hearing from us at every stage of the process.
Leah, is it your guess that the most likely time for a break glass moment is going to be something around the elections next year?
That would be my working theory. I mean, I think for folks who were part of the Erica Chenoweth Q&A that we had a couple of months back, one of the things that they said is that often, in most commonly, moments like that are either in reaction to either an egregious act of state violence or a state effort to steal an election. And so, obviously the former is something that we are both very aware of the concerns around and risks around, and would need to plan around. And also the latter is more of like a thing that we can plan on a timely basis.
Yeah. Cynthia asks another news question. What are ways we can get facts to people who only watch MAGA news?
Oh dear.
That
Yes.
was me. Yeah.
This is also a question that's close to my heart because I am related to some of those people. And I would say with a great deal of love and care, I think we should think carefully about which targets we're trying to move where and how much effort or feasibility there is for different folks. There's a solid like 30% of this country that's like pretty far down the MAGA rabbit hole. Like they consume a closed loop of information from Fox News and OANN and right wing, TikTok, et cetera. And they've bought into a worldview that is not actually super disruptible via specific different facts because, and I've seen this in action, individual facts can always be rejected or displaced or caveated or simply just ignored if you've got a pretty firm worldview cemented in place. And so I would say that if you're trying to think about like where your best energy and effort it is, it's around people who are either, not particularly political, maybe like a little bit checked out, maybe not paying a ton of attention. People who you can form some kind of like common shared value or shared issue identification and organize them from there. People who are like gettable and have not actually totally gone down that rabbit hole. Now, I will say we do have, we've got a lot of folks within our own Indivisible movement who've been part of Truth Brigade, which is an effort that that folks have we've developed here to combat disinformation specifically. And that's really focused, on a theory of the case where the way that you combat disinformation is not necessarily being like, that is wrong. This is how, this is what's right. It's actually like working with people from a common value to move them into a different understanding. And so I would say in general, like if you're having kind of a argument about facts with somebody who's really like bought into an alternate worldview, that may or may not be like a fun thing for you to do. It's not like a great use of your time politically. And where you can, I would focus on people who are like open to being moved and or open to like some amount of shared bonding on a common value.
One book that I would recommend, we did a book club on this and we've done follow-up discussions on this. Anand Giridharadas wrote a book called The Persuaders, which is largely about how do you build a pro-democracy movement with people who don't entirely agree with you. Mo Mitchell, head of Working Families Party, has a good line that I steal from time to time, which is if you're in a room organizing and everybody agrees with you, the room you're in is too small. So I respect the question, Cynthia, of like we are not big enough as it is The resistance, the opposition is not big enough yet. How do we pull more people in? I think that is a right question. And then I agree with what Leah said. We actually don't need hardcore MAGA to convert. We can hit 3.5% easily without converting one hardcore MAGA to our side. What we need to do is bring people who are politically disaffected or lightly agree with us on the issues of fascism, but disagree with us on other issues, to be part of our coalition for the time being, so that we can disagree on economic policy or education policy or climate policy at some point in the future. So again, just would underline, I think Anand Giridharadas' book is quite good. It's very readable and quite practical. I would recommend taking a look. Liz asks, greetings from Indivisible members in Champaign, Illinois. Hello. Can you please give us an update on 1 Million Rising level of participation? What was accomplished? The time window for hosting these events was pretty narrow. Would you consider extending support, materials, access to mobilize to make this an ongoing activity, especially as a way to build awareness and community for No Kings too? Leah,
Great
or do you
question.
want?
Yeah, I'm trying to figure out if I can pull the stats on it. And Ezra, if you have them faster than I
Well, I
do.
know we had more than 300,000 people go through the training program. We had a couple of thousand community gatherings, I believe, Leah, was the overall number. Here's what I would say. I would say there were some successes and some shortfalls, and it's ongoing, is where I would say it. Having 300,000 plus people go through a training on strategic non-cooperation is not pretty good. It is an order of magnitude or two more than any kind of such training that has ever been done in history, just for scale. And that's not coming from me. That's coming from Maria Steffen, the expert in authoritarianism, who helped us do the training. And also, one of the some of the campaigns, like the Avello Airlines campaign, we've seen Indivisible actions organizing against Avello Airlines around the country and having some pretty darn good events, and that looks really good. We're running the Signs of Solidarity event as well, or actions as well. And the idea for folks who aren't following Signs of Solidarity, the goal of this is to build up this sense for people like we were just talking about, people who are not politically engaged, for them to go to a business and see there's a sign that says immigrants are welcome here and ICE is not welcome here. That it's not going to solve all of our problems, but if you have enough take up of that, what that does is it creates this sense that the communities are standing up against the regime, that in fact the public isn't afraid to speak out, and that even businesses are standing up. And I will be honest, we're getting a fair amount of take up of this, but some of the feedback we're getting is folks saying, hey, I canvassed some of the businesses and they said no, they're not going to do it. And I understand that. Look, businesses are probably saying, look, I'm not a political operation. This isn't my business. There are Trump supporters who shop here or eat here, and I don't want to get on the wrong side of them. So while I respect what you're doing, I don't want to put up the sign. And I think some people who are canvassing businesses are getting that and saying, well, that's a good point. I'm not saying this is easy, but here's what I will say. That basic argument of, hey, I understand, but this isn't my fight, that's what Paul Weiss Law Firm says. That's what ABC News says. That's what the universities who are cowering say. That's the exact argument. And one of the challenges for us in this moment is to get people off the sidelines and make them choose, are you with us and the democracy, or are you with the authoritarian? And part of our success is going to come from breaking through to non-political sources and convincing them that they can't stay on the sidelines, that they do indeed have to choose a side. And so here's my more practical recommendation for folks who are thinking about taking up this action and are getting some no's for businesses. Don't start with the hardest business. Canvas the businesses in your community. Maybe you go to the more lefty coffee shops first, or the bookstores or others, and find one or two wins. Find a couple of places first where you can get those signs up, because you need a foothold. And then you go to the other adjacent businesses. And when they say no, you say, but Sam's coffee shop is putting it up, but the bookstore put it up. Why can't you put it up? They're not a political organization. We need to actually create folks who are with us and folks who are against us, and we need to pull in people who are not naturally political to do it. This is new and hard. I don't deny it, but this is the work. This is the challenge. This is why we're doing it.
And agree with all of that. And just to underscore, and then we need to spend our dollars at the places that will take a stand.
Indeed.
And so like there is a potential virtuous cycle here, right? I know a lot of us collectively, we are boycotting Target. we're also going to Costco, right? Like we're trying to
Yeah.
create a cycle whereby people who are part of and who are willing to publicly identify with the pro-democracy movement experience reward for doing so. Um, the other thing I will just add on this is like there's going to be a lot of we're doing a lot of thinking with No Kings too around visual saturation because this is a core thing. Like if you're from a certain generation of political and campaigning organizers, you're very familiar with the phrase "signs don't vote." Um, Folks, Ezra, you're nodding. This was like the classic thing people would say in the or like when I was coming up as an organizer, right? And like, okay, so technically signs don't vote, but they do actually shape how communities understand what is happening. They actually shape your sense of what's normal, what's socially acceptable, what's like, what you are part of in a way that matters a lot. And so, as we're thinking about this, we're thinking about like, how do we create more than a single day? How do we create this sense that we're all collectively part of a movement heading in and that like it's good to be affiliated with the pro-democracy movement heading out. So if you have ideas on that, we really welcome them. But like I think that we're going to continue to dig in on this particular question, both via Science for Solidarity and via other kind of ways of visibly saturating the environment.
Uh, Levi asks, trans people and families of trans kids are one of the primary targets of this administration, and yet this issue seems to be slipping away from broader attention. Minimal coverage of the recent Texas bathroom bans, for example, as well as some prominent supposed liberals embracing certain right-wing talking points. Newsom on sports, Ro Khanna defending anti-trans harasser Graham Linehan. Um, how can we keep the defense of this incredibly vulnerable population as a frontline issue and baseline for anyone claiming to be anti-MAGA, pro-democracy? There are not enough trans people and people who love them to defend themselves. Really appreciate this question. Leah, do you want to talk about some of how we're thinking about this and what we can do in this moment to come to the defense? Because I think it's reasonable to say a lot of the just to reflect back, there has been a lot of attention on immigrants who are under attack now, and it's been the leading edge of a lot of campaigns we've been doing. And early on in the regime, we saw a fair amount of defense of trans communities, and it does seem like in national news, it has been backburnered a little bit more. Although today I'm seeing that they want to ban gun ownership for trans folks, which is a ridiculous thing that the regime is now proposing. So maybe it's going to come back on the news. But Leah, thoughts on how we defend the vulnerable community?
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. Well, so first, I would say this is a really important example of a place where blue states are going to have a huge role to play, and where leverage directed at blue state elected officials is really, really important. I moderated a call for California leaders with the Attorney General from California earlier this week, in which this was something that came up and that folks were asking, what will you do with your office to protect people here in California? That is the kind of advocacy and the kind of like continual creation of the incentives for elected officials that we're going to need in places where we have people who want to be responsive to us, right? I think that there is some work for us at the national level on a sustained basis around kind of disputing some of the really damaging political narratives around the role of trans issues in the 2024 election. I think this is one of several places where Democratic leadership has kind of like decided to go into like a defensive spiral as opposed to like adopt and hold a clear position and defend it forthrightly. And it's having a bunch of damaging kind of knock-on effects around the country. And so I think there's one piece that is just being clear about where we stand and pushing our Democratic electeds to use whatever role, whatever office they have. Um, and I think that, there is another piece of this that's just about like refusing to allow kind of a really harmful analysis of how this played out in 2024 to set.
Mhm.
Anything to add there, Ezra?
We've had actions in the past. I do think the blue state place is the place to lean in. And I will say there's these quote unquote smart Democratic pollsters and message testers and strategists who are advising some of the national leaders that the best way to win on this issue is to adopt some right-wing talking points and show that you are not um, overly woke or too committed to a community that is difficult to defend. And I think it's wrong. I think that is wrong. I think we win by showing up and fighting for our principles and proving people that we're not full of shit, that we don't just turn and run when there's some pushback. And I think the public responds to that. I think it is weird that Republicans want to have political officials or lower level officials evaluate the genitalia of young girls who are trying to play sports. I think that's fucked up. And I don't think we should be tying ourselves in knots trying to moderate our position on that. Why don't we just say that's weird? We shouldn't do that. We should allow kids to be kids. And it baffles me that the response of some Democratic politicians is this is the issue that they need to sell out a population in order to maintain votes. I think it disincentivizes political engagement from folks who want to believe in something and believe that they're on the right side of history. And I don't think it works politically because at the end of the day, if you go a little anti-trans, the other side is just going to go even more anti-trans. If you go a little anti-immigrant, the other side is just going to go a lot more anti-immigrant. Pick your principles and fight for them, y'all. That's going to inspire people to show up for you. That's my approach. I'm not running for office.
Yep, agree,
Oh,
agree. And sorry, I'll just add one other thing that I thought this was like a really inspiring act of defiance that we've been seeing out of Florida. So folks may be aware, the state government paved over or erased the rainbow crosswalk that was a memorial to the Pulse shooting victims. There have been continual efforts to re-chalk with rainbow chalk that crosswalk. Somebody who had done so was arrested, and I believe they attempted to charge him with a felony. The judge was like, absolutely not. More people have been continuing to chalk, to put rainbow sidewalks up wherever they can in the area. That is exactly the kind of like, societal defiance that we should be celebrating and recognizing, because they're trying to erase gay people. They're trying to erase trans folks, and like the refusal to be erased and the making them do crazy shit like arresting someone for chalking up a sidewalk. That is what defiance looks like in this moment.
and defiance looks like passing laws in blue states to protect people under
Yes.
threat by the regime.
And also
To your
that, right,
point,
exactly.
yeah,
Substantively and symbolically. Yes, 100%.
indeed. Leah, I'm just noting I look like a sweaty, tired mess, and you're looking great. And I think the AC turned off in our house, and I didn't get any sleep last night.
Things go off
uh,
the rails when I'm traveling, huh?
I know, I know. Okay, sorry. We're moving on, y'all. We're moving on. Jeff says, this is Jeff from Indivisible, Oregon. With No Kings 2 just announced, what are your best practices for converting event attendees into ongoing 1 million Rising Action organizers? Any guidance on ramps, QR codes, pledge codes, buddy system, follow-ups, 24-hour flow and scripts, assigning first roles, house and meetings, recruit, join, and rapid action toolkits we can use locally, how to track and report momentum so attendees see their impact. These are great. These are actually really great practical questions. One thing that we've been talking about for the Signs for Solidarity is one of the things we lack is a record of which businesses are signing up. Where can we put those on a map? Can we track? They are on board and they are part of a recognition system. Which groups have taken action and can we recognize them? I think these are like healthy, practical questions to ask about how we up the number of actions. Well, Leah, I'll let you go. Any specific questions or thoughts on like, how folks can um, convert event attendees into active,
Yeah.
ongoing participants in the work?
I mean, first of all, Jeff has like a good list here
Yeah.
that we are that we'll make sure gets to the team. What I would say is like we are gonna have some dedicated, like one of the things that we recognize is that absorption of the people who come to these events is kind of a moving target. And like I think we were pulling hands off in like 3 weeks and really didn't land the like what happens next on absorption kind of national asks. We tried to kind of experiment on that with No Kings and the 1 Million Rising program and kind of having the immediate after mobilization mass movement call. And also like we think there's more that can be done before and after these events to actually successfully convert attendees in. One innovation that I will call out that I have seen people do that are seems to have been useful for bringing people in a more ongoing basis is sign making parties in advance. So like have people offer and advertise if you're going, come to this place and we'll all make signs together, as
Mm.
like a way to engage people such that they're in a smaller community before the event, and you can then kind of like follow up with them afterwards. Um, that's like just an off the top of my head idea. I think the other thing about the 1 million rising piece that I would add is like we've designed that really intentionally to be like kind of a conversational guide slash curriculum that can be repurposed for a bunch of different spaces, right? You can do it in your Indivisible group, as a conversational experience, like module. You can have a special meeting on it, you can advertise it in advance, you can be handing out flyers at your events, etc. And so I would really encourage people to also just think creatively about like how do you actually use that module to like bring people in advance of the event as well as afterwards.
Great. Kim asked, please don't take this as criticism, but as a leader of an indivisible group, actually, let me stop you there, Kim, and I'll read the rest. I love criticism. And frankly, can I just say, I would like more constructive criticism on these calls. I think we are building things together, and Leah and I certainly do not have all the answers. We are going to get things wrong. So I'm just going to open the door. If you're
Exactly.
like, y'all really screwed that up, and here's what I wish you would have done better, I welcome that. We're trying to build up. Okay, now I'll continue with the question, but you don't need to apologize or preface your criticism. Happy to dig into these questions because we're all figuring it out. Okay, I've been hearing from folks that the advertised big event is disappointing. It was envisioned that it would be something different and not just another protest. What is the strategy for doubling our numbers for No Kings 2? Already have participation from other groups at the prior protest. So what are we doing specifically to get the crowd size doubled? What about a different approach here of us changing our W-4s for the next 3 months to take out federal taxes as the government rely on our payments each month? Doesn't the government rely on our payments each month? We the people can shut down the government spending. We can make it up in December by paying taxes so we don't get hit with underpayment penalty. Thoughts? Leah, thoughts on like why like we are doing No Kings 2. Everybody hates
Yeah.
sequels. I hate the sequel to this regime. I don't like it. Actually, we started the new Indivisible guide that with the words "Nobody likes a sequel." I think you wrote that, Leah. What what are we hoping to accomplish by doing the exact same thing? Why should we expect for it to be better? Why are we even using the No Kings branding itself to go again? All of these are questions that we debate a lot internally and we talk to indivisible groups and others about. And I think they're reasonable questions. Leah, initial
Yeah.
responses to that broadly. Let's save the second question
Yeah.
for last because I think that's a meaty strategic question to get into.
Yeah. So I think there are like two things that we want to ask people to hold. And the first is that protest alone is not going to get us where we need to go. And the second is that in a would-be fascist regime, protest at a large scale is really, really, really important for holding open civic space for other forms of organizing and for like visible defiance of the regime that both creates the sense that we're part of a bigger movement and demonstrates that one can in fact defy the regime, right? And so those two things are both the case. Like you will hear us talk about how what our ultimate goal is to like take the people who show up and funnel them into meaningful organizations so that we can take higher order actions. And also, like it is really important to have, a big national show of opposition, defiance, strength for a lot of reasons, both for the people who are participating and for the message it sends to everybody who is not participating. So totally hear you on kind of like, aren't we, what else are we doing? I also think that simultaneously, what I would encourage you to try to do with the folks who are sort of frustrated and disappointed around that is start to funnel them into some of the actions that we're identifying around signs for solidarity, around the Avelo Airlines boycott, or encourage them to try to take that 1 million rising framework and think about what is an institution within their own life that is either enabling the regime or is staying silent and neutral in a way that you don't like, and how do you push them onto the field in the fight for democracy? Because ultimately we are trying to do both of these things at the same time, right? We are trying to mobilize in unignorable numbers and pull more people in, and we are trying to organize and leverage the ties, the powers, the relationships that we have collectively to push people onto the field in the fight for democracy. So all which is to say, like my answer would be totally understand not everyone is going to be excited about the next big protest. We do have some tangible ways that we are asking those folks to start to leverage power in their own personal lives, and I would try to funnel them into those.
Can I say something about the branding that we're thinking of, Leah, too? I'll
Yeah.
be honest. I'll be honest. When we announced No Kings won, I was feeling good about it. I thought it was going to resonate. The messaging came out of the movement. Like we saw signs that said No Kings in the first part of the year before we announced it. I thought
Well,
it was
and
going to
I
be
think we want to credit the 50-51 folks because they
50-51.
did these on President's Day, early
That
mobilization. And it was like,
that's
wow,
right.
that's interesting.
That's right.
Yeah.
That's right. And 50-51 was a first partner of No Kings, the original. I was just on with Sarah from from 50-51 yesterday, talking to Midas about No Kings now. So they're incredible partners. But I would say, Leah, I thought we were doing a big historic national mobilization. I didn't know we were trying to create an era together collectively. And now, if you read in the press, you hear people reference the No Kings era. You see people talking about this as something that exists separate from Indivisible or 50-51 or any individual organization. It is something that's taken on a life of its own. And it's broken through in a way that no individual or individual organization has. And I think that's great. It is good that No Kings isn't just an indivisible operation or isn't just a Democratic Party operation. It's not even tied to the Democratic Party. It exists on its own as a pro democracy, anti monarchical rule action and ethos of the people. And we saw some upfront example of this. We were invited to table, Lee and I didn't do this, but some of the team invited to table at a music festival earlier this summer. And we had Indivisible stuff there and No King stuff there. And these are disproportionately younger millennial and Gen Z audience who are attending the music festival. And people were like, Indivisible, yeah, maybe I've heard of that. No Kings? Oh, y'all are connected to No Kings? Awesome. We're with you. When's the next one happening? How do I sign up? So we are intentionally leaning into the No Kings brand because we have the opportunity to define the era that we're in right now. So in addition to showing up big on a day with a message that everybody can get behind, what I would like to come out of this is more people embracing the No Kings brand and ethos. I would like to see flags outside houses of both the United States flag and the No Kings flag. I would like to see stickers of No Kings show up around cities. I would like this to build. And the way that you build is you continue to have big mobilizations like this. So this isn't just like, oh, we were out of ideas, we didn't know what else to call it, so we decided just No Kings again. No, there was a rich discussion about this, and based on our analysis of just how good of a job we collectively did with No Kings, we are doubling down because we think that creates something that can stand up to an authoritarian regime. It's not just one march, then another march, then another march, and it's hard to really identify it all. It's one big thing that is growing and building and persisting over time. There was a second question about withholding taxes. Can I just be frank? I don't think it's a good tactic. Donald Trump doesn't care about you withholding taxes. It's not going to stop what the federal government is doing. The amount of coordination you would need to do to even make a dent in the receipts to the federal government on a quarterly basis is so vast that it's not going to be possible to orchestrate. I'm pretty humble about what I know and don't know about what tactics are going to work, but I also want to call it like I see it. I wouldn't spend time on that. I think it's going to be hard to have the impact that you're going to want to have there. Leah, did you have any thoughts on the tax idea? Okay. Moving on to Guy's question. Our party clearly has not caught up to 2025. Do we plan to use this budget cycle in Congress to oust Schumer and Jeffries and bring in new leaders, advocate for primary, all unable to meet the moment, indivisible endorsing primary candidates very, very early? Guy, I love this question. Leah, I could go off forever, but I'll give you a first whack at it.
Well, let me start with, so Ezra, can you cover the like current state of the budget fracas, and
For
then I'll talk
yeah,
to the like primaries piece of it.
yes. We could spend a whole what's the plan just on this question, honestly, Guy. And in fact, maybe we will in the future. But for this month, back in February and March, there was a fight over government funding because the government funding bill is one of these very rare pieces of legislation that actually requires Democratic votes. It requires 60 votes to get through the Senate because there are so many crazies in the Republican House caucus. Many of them are never going to vote for it because it doesn't like literally eliminate income taxes or other bonkers ideas they have. So it's probably going to require Democratic votes in the House. It will definitely require Democratic votes in the Senate. In March, The House Democrats largely did their job. They voted in opposition to the Republican bill. And then Schumer led the Senate Democrats to cave. He surrendered entirely, didn't get anything for it, gave away the farm, gave it all to the Republicans. He had some bullshit about how the shutdown would have been worse. Nobody supported him on that. It was bogus. Um, it was devastating. And in fact, indivisible groups called for him to step down from leadership shortly thereafter, New York groups and national groups. That was a 6-month funding bill. That runs out now at the end of this month. We are now hearing some Democrats say, well, we're not going to repeat that. We're going to fight hard. You better be ready, Republicans. And look, I will celebrate that. I will be one of the first people out there. But what's troubling right now is that Democrats are talking a big game, but they have not yet unified and named their demands. And this is exactly what happened in February and March. We heard from Democratic leadership repeatedly, you don't worry, we're definitely going to fight. We've got a plan to do this. You bet we're going to fight those Republicans. And suddenly they just caved. So we have a very clear request for them. Tell us what the hell you're going to fight for and tell it to us quick. You just had 6 weeks off. You had a 6-week recess. I want to see a press conference with every Senate Democrat and every House Democrat behind Jeffries and Schumer where they say, you give us whatever it is. Is it Medicaid back? You give us the ACA back? You give us the Epstein files? You put back the money that was taken from rescissions? I'm down, y'all. You tell me what you want, but tell us your demands and then stick with them. Those demands should be very easy to describe. They should be very popular, and they should fracture the Republicans. You make them squirm. And if the Republicans want to shut down the government in order to close more rural hospitals or cut people off of Medicaid or take health insurance away, or my God, keep the Epstein files hidden, fine, the Republicans can do that. But Democrats need to say what they're fighting for, and they're not yet. There are exceptions. Elizabeth Warren, incredible. She's out there saying, "Give me Medicaid. That's the cost of my vote." Great. But we need more than individual representatives or senators. That's the role of leadership. So Jeffries and Schumer, get your shit together. Tell us what your demands are. We'll rally behind you. But if you don't, yeah, you bet your ass there are going to be political repercussions because yes, primary season is coming up. Leah?
You are on fire and appreciate you. On primaries, look, there is not like a magic push this button to replace Democratic, to like change Democratic leadership or change Democratic, how Democrats are approaching the moment. There are primary elections. There's direct pressure, like, your constituent advocacy, and there are primary elections. And frankly, the reason that direct pressure and constituent advocacy can sometimes have an effect is because they're afraid that enough of it going unanswered could turn into a primary, right? So fundamentally, if you have a representative who is not meeting the moment, this is a cycle where every single Democrat should have to defend what they are doing to fight back against fascism. And so really do encourage folks to be thinking critically. If you've got somebody who's disappointing, is there someone else who's throwing their hat in the ring? Are you that person? Do you know that person, right? Because this is not a cycle in which those of us who are outside should sit back and be like, I think the experts have got it. The experts do not have it. The professionals do not have it. We got to be involved on all fronts. You have been protesting, you have been showing up. The follow-up there is turning that into political power, and that does involve choosing your leaders. So now in terms of like Indivisible National's role, one thing I do want to be really clear about is like, we are in partnership with local indivisibles around the country, and we don't go in and say like, that is the indivisible candidate in this district. Get in line, everybody, right? Like, this is a bottom-up driven process. We trust indivisible locals. We work with you on like what makes sense in your, or who you are for. And we're never going to be the people with like $1 zillion to put behind a candidate, right? What we have when we have it is regular people who are door knocking, who are spreading the word, who are having grassroots fundraising parties, who are going out for someone with people power. And so when we're looking at like Indivisible National endorsing, what we're going to be looking for is places where there is a local indivisible group that is enthusiastically behind a candidate, or where there's like consensus with a high level of agreement. There's rarely statewide consensus, but a lot of agreement within a state behind a candidate. That's the kind of alignment that we need to collectively be involved.
I will just say and add to it. Well, So to Leah's point, we don't parachute into districts. And also, I really, really hope indivisible groups in disappointing Democratic districts do start organizing so we can support them. And my plan is to support as much as possible indivisible groups who are fighting for the fight back faction of the Democratic Party. And there are some people who are in Congress who are just not up to the task right now. They are not leading for this moment. They're leading as if it is 1985 and not 2025. And we need to fight like it's 2025. Many of them have been in office since 1985 too. So this is us telling you, yes, please get behind primary candidates very, very early. That is necessary. If you do that with your indivisible group, you will have support from us. I can tell you that. Leah, I think my rant went so long, we went 5 minutes over without even noticing.
We are in fact a little over.
Y'all, just to highlight again, the plan right now is we need to get the word out about No King's Day. If you're not in the DC area, that's your primary task. If you are in the DC area, please show up on Saturday. We'll be out there. Lots of people will be out there. But No King's Day 2, October 18th, nokings.org. Put it on your calendar. Reach out to colleagues, friends, family. Build a plan to have it happen. And next week, when the map goes live and you see those events start populating, let's get events on the map. We had 2,169 events across 27 countries in June. I want us to beat that. I want us to beat that, but that's going to require all of our effort. Leah, any closing inspiring thoughts on democracy?
No, let's see. I feel like you inspired us all with your opening. I feel like we are covered on our inspiring thoughts. And so instead, I'm just gonna offer some continual appreciation and say that I hope to see some of y'all in the streets on Saturday in DC.
See y'all out there on Saturday and see you next Thursday at 3 p.m. for What's the Plan? That was the plan this week. Later, folks.